I was watching a recent video by Critical Think. Recent as in he just put it out today. Either the Pacific is boiling or the Earth is round. Take your pick. And in it, he showed a ship that had zoomed in that was 40 kilometers away. I think he was standing on a lookout that was 200 meters high, I think he said. And you could see the water behind the ship. Then around this time, just a little bit before, probably about here, he showed another one that he took earlier, only 20 kilometers away, I think he said, where he was much closer to the water, and you could see that the boat was already starting to disappear from the bottom up. So this is consistent with what we have seen in history books. So in ancient days, this would be thousands of years ago, the ancient Phoenicians were marine merchants. And back in the day, of course, sail power was the main mode of transportation. So they had a mast already for the sails, and they would have a crow's nest. And they figured this out very early on, that the higher you are up, the farther away you can see. Clearly, if you are higher up, you can see something like 40 kilometers away. But if you're only something like 13 feet from the ocean, you can only see 25 kilometers away. So I also looked at this picture and I thought, oh, hey, look at that. And there's a couple of interesting things that I saw with this. This would be a picture, as an artist rendering, reminiscent of what would be published maybe 100 years ago in a newspaper or in a magazine. And if this is the case, then the flat earth is certainly not a recent thing. So, but I was looking at this photo and they were using a monocular, not a telescope. A telescope would be a much larger and much less portable monocular. So when was the telescope developed? About 400 years ago. When would a monocular, which is a much smaller version of a telescope, have been developed? Probably not that far behind the telescope. That's about where I originally thought I was going to make this video. I just wanted to point out that back in the day, they figured out that if you were in a crow's nest, you could see much farther away. And it would make sense. If you're tossed at sea due to a storm, the difference between being able to regain your bearings and get back to shore would be greatly increased if you could spot land that was, let's say, maybe 30 kilometers away. But then I thought, well, while I'm at it, I might as well get on with one of these other videos that I was working on and doing some quote unquote research earlier this summer. I got myself a P1000 and went to, now I'm kind of landlocked, and I was looking for a body of water that would show some curvature. And of course, I live around Ottawa, so I figured I was going to go to the Nepean Sailing Club and look up the Ottawa River. And after a number of occasions, I discovered Aylmer Island. Now, Aylmer Island is basically a couple of trees and a beach, and this, what looks like some kind of navigation tower of some kind, I'm not sure. So if I measure the distance from here, Now, just for point of reference, I was taking a number of pictures, and one of them that I'm going to show you was at this elevation right here. So in the first set of pictures, the first one I took, I might have been standing here or here. The second one, I was over here. And the third one, I was kind of over here somewhere. So the distance is right here. And here are the pictures. So unfortunately, whenever I was doing this one, I was changing the opacity of the layer so I could rotate and move it around and align it with the other ones. Unfortunately, I left it at 50% opacity, so whenever I anchored it, it remained at 50%. So this is actually 100% opacity, this one right here. But it's still clear enough for me to see what I'm doing. So what I then did was I put some nice blue lines on the edge where you could see the beach and the sky, or the beach and the local flora meet, along with where the tower is, and of course on this side as well, where you could see where the beach and the water meet. So this one here was taken at 7 meters above the water. So there's 7 meters from this point to this point. The second one was 4.5 meters. And you can see that between 4.5 and 7 meters, you can still clearly see the entire beach. And the other one was 1 meter. And if you look carefully, you can see this one here. You can see there's a sea-doo. You can see people on the beach. In one, the sailboat is gone, but you can see that there's still a couple of people left on the beach. Now this one here kind of shifted their position slightly. This one here shifted their position as well. This one here, not quite. Maybe they all did slightly. Maybe I didn't quite line it up properly, but you can see the main thing to observe is that you can see the exact same amount of beach whenever I dropped 2.5 meters. The next one is between 4.5 and 1 meter. And if I change this one to 50%, so you can see the two of them together, you can see this one. There's much less beach available. You can still see these people are still there. And look at the sea-doo. This one here, you can clearly see the white of the sea-doo, and you can see the handlebars. This one here, you can barely see any of the white, and the handlebars pretty much stay where they were. Now there's just a little bit of white that you can see that has been shifted up due to the diffraction around the water, but you can clearly see that as the water is pushing up, it's obscuring part of the beach, and you can see that it's obscuring part of the sea-doo. I went back on another occasion, and this time I took it at many more elevations. I didn't mark down all of the elevations here. I might do that later on, but this one here I took from the same elevation. So this one here, I think I took maybe not on this hill, but maybe on this hill. I forget exactly which one I was standing on, but I think the first time I think I was standing on this hill, second time I was standing on this one. And there's a bit of a bump here, there's a bit of a bump here. So I tried to find the highest elevation I could to still see Aylmer Island. Okay, so this is the highest elevation, and as I go towards the bottom, this one here, I ended up getting something like 6 inches off of the water. So as I step down, you can see there's not much change. You can see the water's just starting to shift a little bit. Not quite. I think I might have misplaced this one. And as I keep going down, you'll see that it starts to shift a little bit more and more and more. And then finally, at some point, this one here was right about here. And as you can see, the closer I get to the bottom, until at some point I'm right against the water. And I did my best to fix up the size. The two bottom photos, there was already starting to be some vertical compression due to the refraction, and I rescaled them vertically so that the peaks would line up. But you can kind of see I didn't really have to scale it horizontally. And then at this point here, it's just on the verge of flipping over to an inferior mirage. I went back a couple of weeks later, and the water had warmed up enough that it was causing an inferior mirage, and at this height, I couldn't even see the tower at all. As you can see, the closer I get to the water, the less beach you can see, and it would be the same phenomenon that we've seen here. Clearly, if you can see the same sea-dew, the same amount of sea-dew by dropping 2.5 meters of elevation, and then suddenly whenever I drop 3.5 meters of 3.5 more meters of elevation, suddenly most of the sea-dew disappears, and you can see almost half of the beach line is obscured from view. Even on a river, you can see that the water bends, and it is entirely consistent with being able to see more the higher up you are, as evidenced by Crow's Nest. That would be, as far as I'm concerned, more proof of the globe.